The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everybody. We have an exciting talk today by Juana Chavez, who's going to present the Recovery Cookbook, something I think we'll all find useful. I'm Sharon Dooley. I'm going to be the moderator today. And as usual, we'd like to thank our sponsor, Dell Software, who makes it possible for us to have raffle prizes at each of our events and do other things throughout the year. If you haven't heard about SQL Saturday, this is something you should know about. They're happening all over the world, and it's a one-day event. It's always on a Saturday. It's free. You may be asked to pay $10 for lunch, but that's the only thing you'll be asked for, and you can always bring your bag if you don't want to pay for the lunch. They're great. The one in Philadelphia that I'm involved with, we usually have 6 tracks and 5 or 6 sessions in each track, so it really is a full Saturday of educational opportunities. And if there's not one near you, consider starting one. PASS will help you. Next week, if you'd like to go to Copenhagen, there's going to be a SQL rally in Copenhagen, and you can find more about it at SQLRallyNordic.com. Coming up at the end of April in Santa Clara is the PASS Business Analytics Conference. If you are interested in going, you can save $150 off your registration by using the code BAVCDB. And whichever virtual chapter gets the most registrations with their code will get a free conference pass to raffle off. So register before April 1st so you count in the DBAVC's statistics. I want to be able to give away that conference pass. Last time the performance chapter got it. I want to give one away this time. This is the DBA, the virtual chapter. We are one of many, and they're all listed on this slide. Multilingual ones as well, not just in English. This one tends to be in English because all of its volunteers speak English, but there are others in other languages, and check them out. You can find out about them on the SQLpass.org, and you can sign up for the mailing list for any that you're interested in. That's how you'll get announcements of the meetings, just like you get the announcements of the meetings of the DBAVC. PASS is an organization that's run by volunteers, and it's real important. Although PASS has paid staff in its headquarters, all the work of the organization outside of that is done by volunteers. And you can volunteer. Say maybe you just want to volunteer for do something at the community summit. Maybe you want to take on something that involves more time. Each month, a volunteer is nominated to be Outstanding Volunteer of the Month. And at the community summit, a volunteer who has made a significant contribution to PASS and the global data professional community will receive the Passion Award. Stay involved. If you're not a member and somebody else passed you the link to this meeting, get involved. Join. The membership is free, just like this session is free. And now I'm pleased to introduce Warner, whose name I have misspelled again. I had it right up the first slide, but I screwed it up on this slide. It has an S at the end. He's a SQL Server certified master and a principal consultant at Pythian. He's in Ottawa, Ontario, and he manages multiple customer and instances. And Ottawa's real cold today, and I bet he would really rather be in Costa Rica, where it would be a lot more pleasant.
Yeah, no doubt about that one.
About that, I know. I've been to Costa Rica, and I loved it. I'm going to turn the presentation over to Warner and let him do his thing.
All right. So thanks for the intro, Sharon. Let me just go right into the presentation mode. And thanks everybody for joining today. The presentation, the Recovery Cookbook. My name is Warner Chavez, and I really hope everybody gets some good ideas of how to A, document your recovery procedures in your environment, and B, get a good idea also. If you've never seen how one of these recovery exercises might go, well then you're probably going to be at least entertained during the demos to see the different things that SQL Server can throw at you. So, very quick bio. I've been a SQL Server DBA for 9 years, almost 10 years at this point. I used to work at HP, where I was a level 3 DBA for SQL Server. Now I'm a principal consultant for Pythian in Ottawa, Ontario, where we do consulting and managed services for clients pretty much, in any vertical and located around the world. I'm also SQL Server MCM. I'm on Twitter. If you want to shoot me an email, you can shoot me an email there, warner@sqlturbo.com. I also have a personal blog. You guys can find it there, sqlturbo.com. Once the session is over today, I will be posting the test backup files and the scripts over at SQL Turbo. Okay? Cool. So, the agenda for today. So, the main objective is I wanted to present different restore scenarios and a recovery scenario in the form of recipes, because I find that really helpful on our SQL Server practice, how pretty much everybody just has the recipe so they can repeat the same result over and over, right? So the main key items for a good recipe, it's easy to remember, it's easy to reference, and it's easy to repeat. Right, so these are the scenarios we're going to visit during the call today. We're going to do a restore of a damaged file group. Then we're going to do a restore if it is the specific file that is missing. We're going to do a restore of a damaged page. So this is a specific page inside a file. And last, we're going to recover from absolutely losing the transaction log. Okay. So the way it's going to work is I'm going to go into the recipe. I'm going to jump into the VM. We'll go through the demo. Then we'll just go through the next recipe. We'll go through it. I'll jump on the VM and go through the demo. There's very little actual slides here. It's mostly just going to be demo and showing you guys, like I said, more or less what happens when you run into one of these scenarios. Okay. So first we're going to do a restore of a damaged file group. So what you need, first of all, database in full recovery mode. In general, I would recommend all of you that are on the webcast right now, if you're responsible for a database that's considered production, you want to have it in full recovery mode anyway. Second, you want to have a full backup, or if you have multiple file groups inside your database, you definitely want to have individual file group backups. That's preferable just in general because it'll give you more flexibility when a specific file group goes down. We can use a specific file group backup. All right, and we'll go through it on the demo. And lastly, you're going to need log backups as well, because we're going to need to roll forward to make sure that the entire database is consistent. So this is the sequence. So let's say you lose a file group. So you want to take the tail log backup. This is also in general. Anytime something funky happens with your database, that's always what you want to do first anyway, because if you do end up having to restore absolutely everything, you want to have that last log backup so that you're able to actually restore all the way or as close as you can to the point where disaster happened. So no, in this case, we'll see on the demo, no truncate might be necessary. I found some scenarios where SQL was okay with just taking the log backup even though there were missing files. In others, I had to use the no truncate option. So it seems like one of those things where you just try it first without it, and then if it doesn't work, you just put it in. Second, we're going to restore the damaged file group with the file group clause of the restore command. And there's some stuff there that might give us some pain, and putting the DB offline and online could be necessary. If you do have to change the status of the database at any point, you want to take another tail log backup to cover for that change in status as well. And then you just want to roll forward the whole thing. Okay. So this is like the reference that I usually keep, but in general, there's nothing as clear as watching something being done. So let's just go straight into my VM and we'll just do the first demo. Okay, so I have a Management Studio open right now, and I have 3 backups I'm going to be using for this presentation. I'm going to restore the first one just to show everybody. The first database that we're going to use for this demo is called HR Multifile. So I'm going to restore it, and then I'm going to go through more or less how it's set up. Okay. Oh, wait, I'm missing the actual backup file. Sorry. Let me just copy it real quick. Right here. All right. Let's try that again. All right, so I got the database restored. I'm going to refresh this and just show you guys we have that new database over there called HR Multifile. And I'm just going to show you as well really quick how it's set up related to files and file groups. So let me just open this up right here. Okay, so as you guys can see, I have a primary file on the C drive on the the primary file group. That's the MDF. Then I have a couple of NDFs on a secondary file group, and those are on the F drive. So let me show you guys again real quick. Here's the F drive. You guys can see I have my 2 files over there. Now the trick here and the way the demo works is that very conveniently my F drive is actually a USB drive that's attached to my machine. So that's how basically I'm going to just pull out the storage from under SQL Server, do some damage to it, and remount it on the VM, and pretty much just see what SQL Server thinks about the whole thing. Okay, so let's jump right in. We have our database set up. I'll show you guys what it looks like. Let's go into the demo. So I can use HR Multifile. First thing, just want to show you guys, I do have 2 tables that are sitting there on that secondary file group. So the hours tracked and the days worked tables are both sitting there on that secondary file group. Okay. So right now there's no issue. I can just do a select star from hours tracked. I could update, for example, all the hours from everybody and subtract 1 hour if I wanted to. No problem there. I can select from other tables that are not in that file group. For example, I can do the employees table, and I can select again, no issues selecting from the objects that are there on that file group, right? So first thing I'm going to do after that is I'm going to take a file group backup, and that file group backup would just be the normal file group backup that you would have as part of your backup strategy. So in this case, I'm taking it right before the demo starts, but in general, let's say if this was a production environment, maybe this file group backup was from, it's from the midnight or something like that, right? I'm just going to take that now. So I have the file now, and here where I say oops, basically what we're going to do is we're just going to unmount the USB drive. So now the USB drive is mounted on my native Windows. So what I'm going to do is simply go in and very merrily just delete those data files. So that's it, they're gone. And now what I'm going to do very nicely, again, I'm going to just go in and tell the VM to remount my USB drive. Now if you guys can check my screen, I remounted F, and F is now empty. Okay. So what happens now? Now the question here is now what does SQL Server really do? So our extract lived on the secondary file group, right? But how many of you are thinking, is this select star going to work or is it going to fail? Huh? So very cool. Let's just run that now. As you guys can see, it actually works, and it doesn't give you any errors or anything, even though the data files are gone. Reason for that is because it's just reading them off the buffer pool, and it hasn't had to take them off of the data files. Now another really interesting thing is I can even update them. So let me just show you guys. I'll update them, and it says it was fine. I got no error. Of course, now the problem is what happens when SQL Server tries to finally write those to the data files. Right? So the update itself actually gives you a success. Yeah, I updated everything because the pages are in memory. But once it tries to checkpoint it, well, that's when you would get the error. In this case, I ran the checkpoint manually just so that I could show you guys the error directly. But this would just pop up automatically once SQL Server. Let's say if your instance is set up to run the checkpoint every 5 minutes or whatnot, at the moment that it decides to run it, it would just throw you this error to the error log, okay? And then I'm just going to tell you guys more or less what it says. It says one or more recovery units belonging to a database HR multi-file failed, typically caused by a lack of system resources such as disk or memory, in some cases due to database corruption. And then operating system returned the error, device is not ready, write offset on the F drive, and here's the file that we just deleted off from the USB drive. Okay, all right. So yeah, things are not working very nice. If we go here, we can refresh the status. It still hasn't marked any issue with HR multi-file, so it's not like it's suspect, right? But it's completely failing to do the checkpoint, right? So first thing we were going to try to do then, like I said, is we need to take that tail log backup because things are getting hairy. So that's the first thing you want to try. So I run this. Now I get an error. First error is right here. It just tells me the operating system, same thing, device is not ready on the file hr_secondary.ndf, right? So it doesn't let me just simply do the tail log backup. This is where I had to add the no truncate option. So just add it, run it. Now in this case, it does work. So I have now on my backup, I have, let me order this for you guys to be able to see it. So you guys can see, yeah, I was able to take that tail log backup from HR multi-file, even though I'm still missing the secondary file group, okay? Now, since I have the tail log backup, I feel, let's say I know I have that file group backup that, we took, let's say, 2 or 3 hours ago or whatever, and I'm just going to try to restore it then because, the files are gone anyway. So let's just try to do that. just run that restore. Okay, so first thing it tells me is that I need to be a master to do this. So let's just do that. Now let's try that file group restore again. Okay, so it gives me an error now. It says the online restore of database HR multi-file failed. Okay, so I can't do an online restore for this database due to the damage that has happened to it. So it says it may be appropriate to perform an offline restore instead. And an offline restore is initiated by using backup log with no recovery. Okay, so again, SQL Server is telling us try to do an offline restore, put the database in no recovery, in recovery mode by using the backup log with no recovery. So it's like, okay, that sounds good. So let's try that. Let's see what happens. Now if I'm doing a backup log again here with no recovery, just like the error message suggested. If I run that, it actually still gives me an error and it does not let me do it. It just says device is not ready and the operating system is returning an error, same thing because I'm missing the data file. So it's not allowing me to put it in recovery even though I am I'm using the backup log with no recovery like the previous error message suggested. So this is where it's really critical for you to have tested these type of scenarios in your environment because these kinds of things come up and you have to be, hopefully you had the previous experience where you can quickly gauge the kind of things that you can do at this point in time, right? So for example, I know that I have the backup chain that I need, and I know that I have even the tail log backup. So if, worst case scenario, I can always restore everything. So I could, for example, try to put the database in, I know that recovery runs when a database is put online, right? So what happens if I put it offline and then put it online, right? Will it put the database in recovery? So this is what I did in this case, and it actually works. If you did not have backups that you were confident that you could restore completely, what I would have done at this point is to extract all the data that I could before doing this, because it could happen that you put it offline and then you try to put it online and it doesn't even go into recovery mode, and then you basically just like bricked your database, and you would need like some third-party tool to actually read directly from the data files or something like that. Whereas right now, at least you got like partial availability, right? You could select all the data out at this point, right? That's in the case like, if you didn't have any backups at all, which, I'm pretty sure everybody that's joined right now to the call, you all have super sound backup strategies, and that would never be you. But, just saying, if you ever found yourself in that situation, you definitely want to get out everything first before trying the next step. Anyway, so that didn't work. I couldn't get database in recovery mode doing the backup log with no recovery. So let's try it the other way. I'm going to put it offline. Okay, so I was able to put it offline. Or refresh here. It's offline. Hopefully you guys can see it. I'm going to zoom it. Okay. So it's offline. Now let's try to put it online. Okay, so I get a bunch of errors, which are understandable. It says unable to open the physical file. Yeah, I know the NDF is not there. I know the other secondary 2.ndf file is not there. So yeah, it can't put it online. Understandable. However, if we go now and we refresh, we'll see that the database has changed now to recovery pending. Okay, so it was able to put it in recovery after offline and onlining. Now, another thing that I want to do right away is, because I was able to change the state, I want to take another log backup. So take that now. Gives me again another error. So I always have, in this case, I still have to use that with no truncate. Now that one completes successfully. Now that it's in recovery mode, let's try to do the file group restore. This is the backup that I took before the demo started. So if I run this now, yep, that worked now. And if I go to the USB drive, well, my files are there again now. So we were able to restore the file group at this point. Now, if I want to, for example, restore the database, it would still not allow me because we need to do additional roll forward. So you guys can see here it says the roll forward start point is at this LSN, and you need to do additional roll forward. Okay, so if I had, let's say a bunch of more log backups, I would have to restore them all. Obviously, for sake of the demo, I take a log backup after the incident happens, and then the one after the state change. There could be more log backups in between your file group backup and the one that you would take at the tail log. Let's say if this file group backup was from 10 a.m. today and you take log backups every 5 minutes, you would still need to restore all those log backups in between. Here for demo purposes, obviously I just have the two. So let's do that. So I'm gonna go in and restore the first log backup. So, and then I'm gonna go in and do the same thing. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the other log backup that I took after we put the database in recovery mode. And at this point, restore with recovery. And now it works. Okay? So as you guys can see, now we have restore database with recovery. I'm able to go here to the databases. I'll show you guys. Right now, recovery, the status was recovery pending. I just need to refresh now the status, and the status is gone now. And if I go back here, this is all restored. So sorry, I wasn't master. Let me go there. HR multi-file. So I can query again. Hours tracked is okay. I can update it like I did before. And the best part is, I can checkpoint it, right? So it's all good. We're back in business, basically. All right, great. So that was scenario number 1, where we basically just lose a file group backup. All right, so I'm going to clean up the backups for our second demo. And we're going to close this out. And for the second demo, we're going to reuse HR multi-file. Let me just jump into the second recipe. So this is going to be restore of a specific damaged file. So it's really, really similar to the scenario we just saw. The only difference really is that it's only going to be one file that is gone, and so we just need to adjust the restore clause to use the file clause instead of the complete file group clause, right? So this could happen, for example, if you had a file group with 2 or 3 files and they're spread on different disks and you only lose one of them, you don't want to restore the entire file group if the other 2 files are okay, especially multi-file group databases. They're usually pretty large, so you don't want to waste too much time, right? If you can get the business back up and running half an hour instead of 4 hours, that's definitely what you want to do, right? So let's just go over really quick again. The ingredients: DB and full recovery. You want to have a full backup or individual file group backups, preferable if you have multiple file groups. And you want to have your log backups, right? So after disaster strikes, you want to take that tail log backup. You want to try to restore those damaged file groups with the file clause. And like I said, in this case, putting the DB offline online could be necessary. Don't do that unless you know that you'll be able to recover. If you don't have any backups, then at that point, yeah, you definitely want to extract all of it out before you try that. After we put the database in recovery mode, if we had to offline online it, then we take another log backup, and then we roll forward the whole thing. And hopefully, we're back in business at that point. Okay? So let's just do exactly that. So this is demo number 2. I'm going to use again HR multi-file. And just a reminder, we have the 2 tables in the secondary file group. So hours tracked and days worked. Okay. And the same thing, these are working just fine. I can select, I can update. There's no problem with it. Okay. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take a file group backup right before we start. And like I said, this would be, you know, your latest file group backup. It could have been from hours ago. It doesn't really matter. And at this point, we're going to do the same, you know, pulling out the storage from under SQL Server operation. So I'm going to disconnect, reconnect to my host, and I'm just going to get rid of one of these data files. So that's it. And I'm going to remount this out to the VM. Okay, so let's just verify it's right here. As you guys can see, the F drive is now only one file instead of the two files that were part of our file group. All right. And then it actually exhibits pretty much the same behavior. If I go and I try to select, it just selects. It doesn't tell me nothing's wrong. If I go and I try to update, it just updates. When I try to checkpoint, it does not like it, right? And in this case, we're getting a similar error instead of just being the other file. In this case, actually, let me see. It throws an error anyway on the file group. It couldn't write to HR secondary either. So I'm going to guess this error actually here looks like a red herring for what the issue is, because it gives you, it says you couldn't write on HR secondary NDF, but the one that's actually missing is number 2. So anyway, let's go through the exercise. Let's see what happens then. So I had already backed up the secondary one. Let's move over to master so we can do our restore ops. Let's try to take the tail log backup. So that's the first thing we need to do always. So in this case, no, it's not going to let us do the tail log backup. So I'm going to do it again with no truncate. So this one does work correctly. So I can go to the backup, and I can see the TRM file is there. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing. We're going to try an online restore. Let's see what it says. It doesn't let us. It tells us the same advice. Try to perform an offline restore instead. Okay. So we'll try to follow the advice, do it with no recovery. In this case, again, it does not let us. And again, we have the error here, right offset. Okay. Now let's try the same thing we did before. So we're going to try to put this offline. So we were able to put it offline. If I can refresh, I can zoom in, show you guys there. Now let's try to put it online again. We get the error again. Understandable. It tells us here now, it finally says that you can't open HR secondary 2. So finally it actually said, you know, this is the actual file that's missing. So very interesting as well. Then we try to refresh this. At least we have it now in recovery pending. Okay. And at this point, we changed the status. So we want to take that the log backup again, just like we did on the previous example. And on the restore database, we want to make sure that we're using that file group backup that contains the file that we are interested in. Okay? So, and I say that because obviously, I mean, if we had, let's say, many files, many file groups, it could be a little bit harder to figure out which one you want to use. You can always just consult, for example, a file group and just do like a restore with a file list only or something like that. I mean, you know, make sure that you're restoring the actual file that you want, right? In this case, the only difference, like I mentioned before, is I'm actually specifying that I'm interested only in HR underscore secondary 2, right? So I'm going to restore this one. And this one completes successfully now. And if I go and check my USB drive, you can see that HR secondary 2 has reappeared. So we're in the right track. And now this point is the same process as we had before, right? So we want to be able to roll forward with the first tail log backup that we took. Then we want to roll forward with the log backup that we took after the database entered recovery mode. And after we roll those two, we can restore the database with recovery. And as you guys can see at this point, we're back in business. I can refresh the status, Management Studio will pick it up, and HR multi-file is now okay. All right. If I go up and just try to do whatever I was doing before, for example, run the update. Sorry, gotta go back into HR multi-file. And we can see the update completes, and now we're able to actually checkpoint, right? So we're good. We're back in business. We recovered, and we just had to restore one file. A lot better than having to restore an entire database. Could be, let's say, imagine if we're working with like a multi-terabyte database, and we have to restore or compare the time it takes to restore, let's say, 4 terabytes over a one file that may be like 200 gigs or something like that, right? So that was scenario number 2. Let me go back to the slides, and we'll go through scenario number 3. So scenario number 3 is to restore a damaged page. Usually this happens, or I've only seen it happen when there's some kind of storage issue, and one particular page or a set of particular pages get damaged. Again, if you can only restore 1 or 2 pages, it'll save you a ton of time compared to restoring a full file or a full file group or a full database. So you just have to understand how to, really approach the problem. If you see an error like that on your error log, run a checkDB, and if you verify, yeah, it's only like 2 or 3 pages, then think about doing it this way. Okay, so ingredients. Oh, sorry. The ingredients are the database in full recovery mode. The file group must be read-write to be able to do a page restore, and the full backup or the individual file group backups are what you're going to need to pull that page from, right? And after that, you need those log backups so that you can roll it forward, so the entire database is consistent at the very end, okay? And the sequence is going to be to restore the damaged page with a file group backup or with the full backup. Either one could be the starting point as long as it contains that page on a healthy state, obviously. Then you want to take the tail log backup and then, roll forward the whole thing until you're done. Okay, so let's just see it live. I'm going to jump right in here. And I'm going to restore the one I'm going to use for this demo. It's called HR Corrupted. So let me just run that. So if I refresh this now, I have a new database here, HR Corrupted. All right, so let's jump into the demo. So everything's good at the beginning. For example, we have our database HR Corrupted, for example, right here. So I can go into it, I can select from it. I have no issues at the moment, right? So I'm going to take a backup log. This would be like your last backup that happened before the page got corrupted. So it would be a backup somewhere in your backup strategy, right? Now I'm taking it right before the demo, but you could have been taking it, maybe 10 minutes ago or something like that. How I'm going to do the corruption, I'm just going to use the DBCC write page that's undocumented, and I don't recommend it to use for anything. It's just for demo purposes. So I use DBCC IND to pick a page, basically, from the hours tracked index. And then to run a write page, I have to put it in single user. Okay. And then I'm just going to do that. So basically I just zeroed out a page with that command. And I'm going to reopen the database. And what happens now if I do a select of the whole thing? So the query runs up to a point, and then once it hits the page with the problem, it actually just comes back and says, you know, there's an issue here, logical consistency, IO error, incorrect checksum. The problem page is right here in database ID 2. So you guys can see, I'm just going to zoom into it. It is the page that we intentionally zeroed out. And it just, you know, at this point I can't select the entire table. So let's start from hours tracked because that page is there. To verify further at this point, I could run a dbcc checkdb. And it will give me all these errors. So it'll tell me, you know, that the issue is right here, again, with the page 1356. So that's, you know, file 1, page 356 has the issue. It will tell me again the page cannot be processed. It'll tell me that same page was not seen in a scan, even though it was referenced by other pages. And same thing, it'll say, for example, that page 1357 is missing a reference from that previous page 1356, right? So in this case, I mean, we know that it was 1356 the page because we zeroed it out, but if you just came, you know, you just found this error right here with CheckDB first time you run it in the morning as part of your normal maintenance, for example, then, you know, this is really the hint here, is that page 1356 can't be processed, and that's what really throwing out the other pages off, right? So you want to, you know, focus on this one. So anyway, nothing else we can do about it, so it's time to run a restore. How do we run a restore of a page? Like I said, you can use a full or a file group backup. In this case, I'm just going to use the full backup. And the only difference here is that I'm going to restore this specific page, right? So I specify page, the page clause, and I use the same syntax that CheckDB uses, is 1:356, okay? And I'm just going to run that. And it says, you know, it was successful. I was able to restore the page. Now, are we online or are we not online for this database at this point? So if you guys remember the other two demos, when I removed the file group completely, I wasn't able to restore anything online, right? Everything had to be done offline because of the damage done. But in this case, actually, I can go back to HR corrupted, and I can still query some of the things, right? So I can't query the entire hours track table because it tells me that it's actually marked as restore pending, okay? So what this means obviously is that I restored the page, but I still haven't rolled it forward, right? So I can't get the entire content of hours tracked at this point, but even though we have a restore pending on a table, I can still query, for example, the employees table without any errors at all. Right, so we are kind of in a partially online state. The only affected table is the one that actually contains that specific page that we're trying to restore. Okay. So let's roll it forward. We'll roll it forward with the actual log that I took before starting the demo. So let's run that. Oh, sorry, I have to jump into to master. Let's roll that forward. So okay, so it tells us roll forward. Actually, it gives a pretty good error here, or message. It's not really an error. It just says the roll forward point now is at this LSN, and it does tells us that additional roll forward is required to complete the restore. Okay, so and you guys may think, well, we didn't like take anything after we took that log backup. So that's exactly what it is. Now we need to take the log backup. We did not back it up after the whole disaster happened. So that's the one that is still needed. So I'm just going to back it up right now. And you guys can see in this case it doesn't require the no truncate option because the files are there. It's just the page that is corrupted. So I didn't need to add that with no truncate that I had to add to the other scenarios, right? So I was able to back up that log, and I'm just going to restore it over again, so it just rolls forward that particular page. And now that page has been rolled forward completely. If I select star from hours tracked, I get no messages. Finally, I can select the entire table again. Okay, and just for complete peace of mind, we can run a DBC check DB, and it comes back absolutely clear. Okay. All right. So that was oh, sorry about that. So we're done with this demo as well, and we can just jump back to our last scenario. And this is recover from losing a transaction log. So the transaction log is probably the most problematic file if you lose, because you can't just really go back to, like, let's say a file group backup and tell it to restore me the transaction log. The number one option you have really if you lose the transaction log is to just restore the database from backups. This is one of the big reasons why you never want to have a transaction log without a storage redundancy. That's just, you always want to have it in a mirror, at least, hopefully with more than just 2 copies you could have of the transaction log in your hardware. So the number one option is to restore from backups anyway. But if there are no backups, and I put there, shame on you, because, I mean, obviously if you're a production DBA, there's no excuse to not have any current backups of your database. But sometimes really what happens is, and I've seen this situation as well, is that we maybe are aware of like 10, 15 systems in our company, and then somebody comes back and is just like, hey, this SQL server from that department that we never speak to or whatever just crashed, and they lost their transaction log backup, and you're like, whoa, nobody never ever told me about this server. Like, what does it have? Do you guys have any backups at all? And they're like, I don't know. Like, we just like installed SQL Server with like next, and that's it, right? So a lot of the times we're just placed in a situation where, it's not our fault, but it is our problem. So it is what it is, right? We just had to roll with the punches. So if we lost the transaction log and there are no backups, then really the only thing we can do is put it in emergency mode and try to rebuild the log. So the main ingredients, I would say, for that type of scenario is really that the system stakeholders have to be aware that after the log is rebuilt, there's possible loss of data and some inconsistencies, okay? And how much loss of data and inconsistency will really depend on how much was still there in the transaction log that was in flight. Basically, transactions that were started and not committed yet, or were started and not rolled back yet, right? So all that is going to be lost. And then the other main ingredient is a lot of luck, some faith, and an up-to-date resume in case this actually was your responsibility and you forgot the backups. But hopefully, it won't happen like that to anybody here in the call. So what's the sequence? Well, we run an alter database and the name of the database, set it to emergency. Then we run a DBCC check DB. We have to repair with allow data loss, just so it's very clear, and single user will be needed for that command. And then we just, hopefully log is rebuilt, and we can put it in multi-user mode and be back in business. All right. So let's just jump into the last demo and see how that works. So I'm going to restore the last database here I'm going to use. It's called HR Emergency. So I have restored it, and you guys will see HR Emergency, the LDF file, is right there on my USB drive. Okay. And let's just run through the demo. So I can go into HR Emergency. I can select, for example, from hours tracked. Now I'm going to start a transaction. Okay. So I have a transaction open now here on our HR emergency database. And what I'm going to do is, in this transaction, what we do is we're going to take the hours that people tracked this month, and then we're going to put it on a table called hours tracked for last month, and then we're going to start everybody over again from 0. and then we commit, right? So this is supposed to be an atomic operation. We're supposed to load the hours from last month, then we're going to zero out the ones from this month, and then we commit it, right? So it's supposed to be all or nothing, right? So I'm just going to run that right now. So I was able to insert it into hours track last month. I can select, so I have the backup from everybody from last month. Now what happens is, and actually I'm even going to checkpoint it. So that's all been checkpointed. However, remember I haven't committed it yet. Okay? So I haven't committed this transaction in particular. It's just been started. I did some changes. The checkpoint process, I ran it manually, but it could have run at any point in time in the background. And now, oops, it's going to happen that we're going to lose the transaction log. Okay, so let's do that now. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to remount the USB drive, and I'm going to destroy the transaction log for HR emergency. And then I'm going to jump back and remount it. Okay. And we can see here my USB is remounted to the VM and the transaction log is gone. Okay. So let's assume again this is this transaction that we had in flight, and let's just try to do the update part now, because we already saved the hours tracked to last month, and now we have to zero out the hours from everybody. So we don't, it wasn't supposed to be an atomic operation. So now let's run this update, and immediately we get an error, right? If the log is just not available. What else did it say? Error during undoing of a logged operation. Severe error occurred on the current command. Resolve errors. Restart the database. A lot of alarms. Hopefully this bunch of red text would scare anybody anyway. Obviously we can't run an update, even less to commit. Like let's just say, there is no even corresponding begin transaction at this point. We just can't do it. If I go back here actually and refresh, you guys can see automatically, without having to do anything, SQL Server actually put HR emergency on a recovery pending mode. Okay. Now, if I don't have any backups, well, there's not really that much that I can do. In this case, what we would do, especially because I completely lost the log file, right? It's not like I can take a tail log backup when the entire log file is completely gone, right? So no choice. Let's set it in emergency mode. So let's just do that. Okay. So I have set it in emergency mode. Now once it's in emergency mode, you can attempt to do a repair allowed data loss. However, if I run it, it'll tell me that the database needs to be in single user mode. Okay. So that's what I'm going to do right now. So it's in single user mode now. Then we run the repair allowed data loss. And just want to make sure, go all the way down. And finished, found 0 allocation errors, 0 consistency errors in HR emergency. And if you actually go back now to the USB drive, you guys can see I have a brand new HR emergency log file timestamped to the moment where I ran the DVCC checkDB with repair allow data loss. And at this point, I can open it up for multi-users, so anybody could run in. I would recommend as well, after something like this happens, you run checkDB again once you open it up to everybody. Make sure that you get no errors, which is good. And then you can test again. For example, I can do HR emergency. It's good. I can select from the hours tracked. It's good. But you guys remember, for example, what happened with this transaction that was interrupted midpoint, right? So you guys can see, basically, now the transaction is materialized even though it was never committed, right? So hours tracked last month now has content even though we never got to commit, and we never also got to set hours tracked to 0. So if I go and query hours tracked, it also has data anyway, right? So this was supposed to be an atomic operation. We load the data from last month into the last month table, and then we zero everybody out. Instead, we ended up with, a limbo state where we do have content in the last month table, sorry, but we never got to zero out the current month's table, right? And depending on this is very dependent on the database. This could be, easy to do. In this case, obviously, we would be able to notice that, oh, it just wasn't zeroed out, so let's just restart this process and run it again. But imagine on a database that might be receiving thousands of transactions per second, it would be a nightmare, right? How would need to come up with a process to basically make sure that everything is consistent again at the data level, right? The classic example being the bank, where you do a transfer from one account to the other. You debit one account and you credit the recipient of the transfer, and then you debited one and never got to credit the recipient, right? And then suddenly it's like, well, it basically money just disappeared out of thin air because of issues like this, right? So never recommend it as a first response to losing a transaction log. However, I am very practical of situations that many of us face on our daily work, and I have seen this in the field as well, where somebody basically gets stuck with a system that, again, it wasn't their fault that it didn't have backups, but it becomes their problem because it's inside their company anyway. So, always good to just have it in mind. It is something that you can do if you have no other solution for the problem anyway. All right, and just a small note, finishing up. Difference, that was a developer edition that I was working on, so it's functionally equivalent to enterprise. But in standard edition, the scenarios are always offline. The first two scenarios, we had to do it offline anyway, so that would have made no difference. The third scenario, the page restore, I would have had to do it offline. So basically, I would have to put the database in recovery mode by you doing a backup log with no recovery, and then I could have restored the page. In Enterprise, it would have looked exactly like it looks on the demo. You would just be able to restore the page and still be partially online. Okay, and DBC set CheckDB to rebuild the log. That is available in either edition, so that should not make any difference as well for the purpose of the demo. All right. So a recap, go over your environment, and also in this case, I was working obviously with my demo database that I tuned to show these different scenarios. You might have different setups. You might have just databases with one primary file group. You might have databases with read-only file groups and read-write file groups. Make sure that you adapt your restore recipes to the real scenarios that you have in your job. If you don't have and you've never tested this before, please get a test machine, run the scenarios yourself, document the steps. Like I said, I like the recipe type of documentation, but whatever works for you. Hopefully this gave you some ideas of the scenarios you should be testing as well. And just last, this shouldn't be one of those things that you do once and you forget about it, because environments change a lot. So if there's a change in the database layout, if there's a change in your infrastructure, if somebody just changed the backup tool from native SQL Server to using a third-party tool, then revisit the documentation, revisit your recipes, and go back to the test and make sure they are still relevant for when you face a situation like this. Like I said, you never want to be in a situation where this is the very first time that you've had to do something and it's very high pressure. Okay? So, any questions at this point?
Thank you, Warner. I have some questions.
Yeah.
So anytime the state of the database may change during a recovery scenario, should we be taking a log backup?
Yeah, you should. And actually, I couldn't show it because of the purpose of the demo, but at some points, for example, if you were to forget to take that log backup, and then you would try other things, for example, as part of your troubleshooting, you could end up with not being able to go back and take that log backup, right? So that's definitely, once you change the status, you do want to do that. it doesn't hurt. That's what I can say. It most likely will be useful. You will need it to roll forward all the way to the end, so you might as well take it every time you change the status, just in case. Yeah.
What are the available options to easily select all the data out before the offline? Or
yeah, okay, so options, there's many, but I mean, you could do BCP, you could do SSIS, you could even just use the import-export wizard that comes with Management Studio. I honestly like the SSIS or the BCP options, and I think, you know, if you don't have a massive amount of servers and their list of databases is fairly stable, you could even like be prepared for such a scenario and just pre-create all this stuff, right? So you could have like a full export of your database just on a table level, and in case, you know, you never know when these kinds of things will happen. If it were to happen, you would just be completely prepared, roll out your script, and be able to export everything. But yeah, either SSIS or BCP, they will work just fine. Also, another thing that would work is even if you just want to export it to the same instance, you could do like a cross database insert select and move it to another database, right?
there's a secondary question. After the offline, is it okay to simply copy the files from the OS, or is it too late then?
To copy the files from, well, in this case, we don't, well, I'm doing a restore from backup, right? So I'm not assuming I have the files available to just copy them over from somewhere else, right? And the other thing with the files, even if we had some files available, they might not be at the exact state where they are still consistent with the database, right? So the restore option is always more robust than you trying to just, you know, kind of like full SQL Server into picking up the backups itself, right?
Okay. For the scenarios with the restores, in the first two scenarios, if I don't have the file group backup, will restoring the full backup work the same way as having the file group backup?
Yeah. Yeah, so that's that. If you have a full backup, you can still specify those clauses. You can specify the file group clause or the file clause, even if you have the full backup. So you would still save yourself the time of restoring the whole thing. So yeah, it still works. It still works with a full backup.
And when restoring the full backup, I guess I need to specify with no recovery.
In that case, yes, you will need to specify with no recovery because you want to be able to roll forward the other logs, right?
Does this procedure work with databases set to the simple recovery model?
No, it doesn't. Just because, you know, database isn't simple, you can't really roll them forward. So that's why all the recipes had the ingredient of the database in full recovery mode. And that's also why, in general, I said, if you're taking care of a production database, just make sure that it's in full recovery.
There's a request for the script. If you'll send it to me, I'll post it.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I have the scripts. I also have those HR something databases. So I will be. I'll post them on the website. I'll send them to Sharon, and I'll also post them on my blog.
Okay.
I think I mentioned on the first slide as well.
File. Is it possible to restore only one table like Oracle?
No, you can't. You need some kind of third-party tool. There are third-party tools that do it, though. If you do some research online, there are third-party tools that might do an object level restore, but it's not native in the product. So just with SQL Server, you really can't. With third-party tools, you can, but again, you need that specific tool to do it. But you can look it up online. You know, I think Redgate, Idera, Dell's Dell solution as well. They all have a similar functionality where you can just restore one object. Yeah.
If multiple backups occurred after a corruption, would all need to be restored to get the database back?
Yeah, probably the log backups, you will need all of them to roll it forward. For example, let's just talk about like the page. If you, let's say you had the page was corrupted and you just didn't notice because it's just one page and you had like 20 log backups after, you will have to restore the page from either the full or the file group backup that you have and then roll forward the 20 log backups that you did after. It's just so that the page is completely consistent with the rest of the database.
Can the file group restore of a database be done when the database is in simple mode?
To be honest, I'm not really sure if you can, if the primary file group is okay. I have the feeling that you might need to, that it might be possible, but I'm not really sure, to be honest. I would have to go back and check, because there are some rules around it, especially if the file group is read-only or read-write. I believe read-only might be possible because it's read-only, but read-write you might need to go and just restore a full completely. So yeah, I really can't tell off the top of my head. I would have to go back and revisit that type of scenario.
Okay, there's a question about whether the presentation is going to be available for download. Warner's promised to send the zip files containing the databases and the scripts. And if you want the PowerPoint, he can put that in the zip file too. The whole presentation has been recorded. However, Paz is having a problem with getting the recordings onto the website. So it'll be there, but I can't, it would normally be there today, but it won't be because I can't guarantee whether I can upload a recording or not today. Some days I can, some days I can't. So it'll be there, but not necessarily today. The other stuff I can upload as soon as Warner sends it to me. And then one final question. With a database restore using file streaming, we get the following error, but I don't know what the error is. I mean, the questioner didn't tell me what the error was. Do you have any tips on recovering the DB?
Oh well, honestly, I can't do support like on a Q&A session, to actually tell you what the problem is. So for that kind of stuff, if you want some help out, shoot me an email at my warner@sqlturbo.com, and when I have some free time, I can take a look.
Okay, that's all the questions. Thank you very much. I have one final task. And that is to tell you all that Jane Shen, sjbxh@yahoo.com, is our raffle winner, and Paz headquarters will be in touch with you to send you your prize. And thanks again, Warner. It's always a joy to have you with us. And keep your presentations coming. The more, the merrier.
Well, thanks, Sharon. And thanks for all the questions, everybody. There was a lot of questions and some really good ones as well. Now I have some homework. I'm going to go and check out that the simple recovery one, and I'll probably post it on the blog later this week as well. Okay?
I'll send you the questions log so you have it.
Okay, cool. Thank you, guys. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.